Hey
Welcome to
there.
AgencyRise, the podcast where digital marketing agencies rise together. I'm your host, Chris Rudolph. I've spent the last decade coaching digital agency founders, helping them scale, systemize operations, and break free from the day to day grind. On this podcast, we talk about what really moves the needle for agencies, getting clients, building a team, creating systems, productivity, focus, and freedom. No hype here, no guru nonsense, just real conversation from the agency trenches. So today, my guest is Brooke Sellas, the founder of B Squared Media, who is based in Maryland. B Squared Media helps brands turn social media into a true customer experience engine by focusing on connection, trust, and community, not just content. She speaks at events like Social Media Marketing World, B2B Marketing Forum, and Inbound, and also teaches marketing classes at the university level. So, Brooke, welcome to the podcast.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
For those of us out here that may not be familiar with you, tell us a little bit about you and your agency.
So I started B Squared Media almost 14 years ago. We'll turn 14 in May of 2026, which is crazy to say out loud. And I tell people all the time, I'm really a salesperson masquerading as a marketer. I've been in sales for most of my life before starting B Squared Media. So I think in a way that gives me a little bit of a competitive edge because I'm really a sales focused CEO versus a marketing focused CEO, even though my company is a marketing company.
I love it. I love it. Well, tell us a little bit. I know you have a lot of experience, especially when you talk about social media and how many years that's actually been a thing. How is your agency evolved over time? Maybe take us behind the scenes a little bit.
Yeah. So when we started, we were a traditional social media marketing agency, very focused on, content for social media channels. Our clients were typically small to mid-sized brands. A few years later, we opened up paid media because as we all know, in social media marketing, once paid media came on board, you kind of had to use it in tandem with social to kind of drive the needle. Organic just wasn't working on its own anymore. And then about 9 years ago, we started offering customer support on social media channels. And that has really changed our business a lot. Fast forward to today, and our biggest clients, our biggest revenue stream, the biggest logos that we work with all sit inside of that customer care, those customer care services for social. So we're kind of trying to look at that and decide how to pivot moving forward because as I'm sure some of your audience knows, regular social media, like the content part of it all and the paid ads of it all has gotten very messy and very difficult and is quite frankly very subjective. What one client loves, another client says doesn't offer any value. So that's kind of where we're sitting right now is evaluating ourselves as a social media agency and deciding how best to move forward, knowing all of these things.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So tell us, what is like social care, like
Yeah,
from your
great
perspective?
question.
'Cause I think you get different answers depending on who you talk to.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So, most people assume that customer support on social media is just retention, right? Because when we think of customers coming to social media and needing support, it's needing support, right? They're complaining that shirt that they ordered is missing a button, the flight was delayed, the luggage was lost, whatever it may be, right? That's what we typically think of. But there's a big disconnect in what leadership thinks social care is, which is a place for complaints, and how customers actually use social for support. And what we've seen over and over again, and we've researched and we've put out reporting on, and this is what we work with our clients on too, is that a lot of the times there's actually buying support that's happening. So our POV is social care is the act of both retaining and acquiring customers through social media channels. So we're proving ROI every day for our customers because we're either saving a customer, we're helping reduce churn and friction, or we're actually selling new customers on whatever their product or service may be on social. So when somebody comes through, Chris, you might come through and you might say like, well, hey, do you have this product in my size? That's an intent question, a sales intent
Mhm.
question. And we say, yeah, we do. Here's how to find it, right? Maybe somebody doesn't answer you at all. And then what happens? Or we do things like, hey, Chris, yes, we do. And if you slide into our DMs, we've got a little something, something for you. So we have Chris slide into our DMs. He gets some sort of like one single use promo code for whatever it may be, depending on the brand. Now he's purchased the product with our promo code, and we can directly attribute that revenue to social selling, social care, and essentially B squared media.
I love that. So, and you said you've been doing this for like 9 years, this social care, but I'm just hearing over the last several years where this is becoming more common. What was
Yeah,
that like?
we
It
were
sounds like
stupid early to market.
yeah, tell us about that experience and some of the thoughts and decisions you had to make along the way with
I
that.
literally owe it all to one of my clients who's been with me for 10 years now. And they originally signed on with us to become just your average, I say regular social media, right? The way most people think of social media, they wanted us to create content, to publish it to their pages. If people came through and commented, to respond to those comments, basic, what I call social media management. And over working with them in that first year, they had a lot of what we call volume of conversation, meaning the amount of people either directly mentioning the brand, so like using the at symbol and tagging the brand and talking to them, or just talking about the brand and the products in general. So you would have to use social listening to find those mentions. But they had a ton of volumes of conversation. And they noticed that content had nothing to do with that conversation for the most part, maybe
Interesting.
5% or less. What was happening were those either acquisition or retention conversations. So somebody having a problem with one of their products and needing support, not getting what they wanted on the phone or through email, or they hadn't gone there at all yet. Or saying like, where can I find this? Do you ship here? Do you have it in these colors and these sizes? So once we kind of got in and we saw this volume of conversation and they already knew it was happening, they were like, well, can you help us with that? Like, I know that's not creating content and publishing and doing the regular social media management, but like, we feel like this is actually way more important than the content because it doesn't have anything. The content's not, really moving the needle with any of these conversations. And from there, it just became a very open conversation about like, well, yeah, we could do that. And over the next couple of years, we essentially beta tested what we now call social care, this service with this large enterprise brand and then brought it to market a couple of years later. But it's all owed to them. They saw that signal. They saw that signal through the
Mhm,
noise because I think a lot of us, quite frankly, are still enamored with content. Like that's the end all be all for social. And I
mhm.
don't think it is anymore. I'm here to tell you, I think if you're still focused on content, you're going to get left behind because these conversations are happening for nearly every brand, especially for the larger brands that are product focused.
Wow, that's really really powerful. Just that, where are the conversations happening and like the interactions with the customers. So how has that evolved? Like I know you started with one client. It's almost like a
Yeah.
live beta test, and then it starts to get traction. What how has that
Yeah.
changed like B squared
Uh,
media over
well, it
the years?
took forever. So, they started asking these questions, 9, 10 years ago, 10 years ago, I guess it was. We kind of beta tested with them for a year or two, and then we brought it to market and it was like crickets, right? Because again, we were so early to market. People are still, and obviously 10 years ago, content was everything, right? Content was
Mhm.
all you needed to be a
Thing.
success on social. And then we started to see a lot of rhetoric around like, well, social media doesn't have a return on investment. And so as I was talking to people with my sales hat on, because I'm the sales team for the company, I would say, well, what are you looking for? What are your goals? 9 times out of 10, they would say return on investment. And I would say, but you
Mhm.
see how content isn't going to get you a return on investment. And then I would explain to them what social care was and how that's literally set up for return on investment. Like that's how you actually get to return on investment on social. So slowly, ever so slowly, Chris, I started changing some minds and we started getting some more clients around social care. And really, just about 2 to 3 years ago, we are now getting these larger enterprise brands coming inbound and using the term, hey, we want to talk to you about social care services, which is
Oh
like
wow.
music to my ears because I've been fighting this fight for like 10 years now. And it's just now, I think, coming to mainstream.
That's thanks for sharing that because I know I talk to a lot of founders out here that are brilliant and they're like they're seeing like into the future and they see some signals, but it's still early and not everyone understands and they get weird looks that
Yeah.
if you really
That was
believe
me.
it and you believe it's valuable to stick with it and to I imagine you probably were doing some, just like things to be able to educate. Yeah, tell us like, yeah, anything that you found that was
Yes.
helpful in
Yes.
going from something that people didn't know what it was or didn't understand or just had a different view and really educating them. Anything that stands out?
Yeah, I had to, like, creep my way into the conversation. So, you talked about speaking, and I do a lot of speaking, and I have for many, many years since we had this kind of social care aha moment 10 years ago, but I couldn't put in an abstract for a talk on social care because the people at the top at the conferences would be like, I don't understand what this is." So I'd have to, like, figure out how to talk about social care in a way that would get people to sit up and pay attention, but not call it social care. So I was talking about like social media ROI. I was talking
Mm,
about social listening, which is a huge component of what we do in social care because people are talking to you on social when they're, again, tagging you or commenting on one of your comments or coming into your DMs. But more people are talking about you. So, about
mm,
your brand, about your products, about your services, about your stakeholders. They're not tagging you. And if you're not looking at all of those conversations, which make up way more of the conversation volume than when people are talking to you, you're losing out on all that voice of customer data and information. So, social listening became like my signature talk for years and years and years. And what I was really trying to educate the audience on was like, hey, these conversations are happening with or without you. Number one. And number two, if we can go through and look at this customer data and do it from a lens of an ROI perspective. So where are we seeing churn and friction and where are we seeing buying intent and then tackle social that way? That's how we move forward. So people would get that, but I could never call it social care.
oh, that's interesting. The packaging and positioning is so key. Like, like talking
Yeah.
using terms that people
Yeah.
understand and like kinda giving people what they think they need or what they want and but really like educate them on, in a way and when you have their attention of what they really need. That's what I'm hearing from you in a way.
Yeah. Well, and I had to make a few enemies. Obviously, the content marketers didn't love me because I was like, content, you know, yeah, we need content, but like it's not really it's kind of like the end of the line, not the beginning. Like we don't start there. And so I had to make a few and I had to break a few eggs, as they say, to make the omelet, but we got here. It just took us a really long time.
Yeah, I'm curious. So you started in more traditional social media, which is content and creative and all the platform.
Yes.
And then you've evolved to the social care side of things. I'm curious to see how did that go internally, like with your team? I'm just thinking of people that are content strategists
Mhm.
or they're social media managers. Like they're all about the things that they do.
Oh,
Tell us a
yeah.
little bit about how that went.
Yeah, it doesn't go well, you know? I think a lot of times when we think about social media, it is fun. I have fun with it too. Creating content is fun. Obviously, there's the whole science behind social media and the way dopamine happens and oxytocin and all of the endorphins that are released when we get likes or comments or engagement on our content. It is fun. I love how fun it is. But at the end of the day, my job as the CEO is to move the company forward and to grow the company. And sometimes that means we have to cut out some of the content or the fun things, or as we were talking about in the green room, Chris, we're niching it more into that social care, into those social care services. And some team members were definitely not happy with me for this pivot and this decision. But as we were talking about, I'm not just looking at the microcosm of B Squared Media and our clients and our team. I have to zoom out and look at what's happening on a macro level in the world, in our country, with the markets. And, starting in 2024, the end of 2024, we started hearing a lot of conversations from our clients and from, colleagues of mine and their clients that budget freezes were happening, hiring freezes were happening. They were losing clients based on certain money making decisions, like a financial decision. And so the pivot is always difficult because a lot of your internal players don't look at the whole board like I'm trying to do,
Mm,
right, on a micro and a macro level, and so they feel slighted or like it's not fair, like it's not gonna be fun. But at the end of the day, my job is to make sure everybody has a job. And we haven't even talked about AI yet. I think AI is a massive threat to basic or traditional social media marketing and paid media marketing. I really do. And with all of those things happening, and there's obviously a million other factors that I'm looking at, I made the decision to cut back on content and to really niche into and focus on social care, which means a very specific set of channels, a very specific set of content. It's not fun content because that's not our ICP. They're more buttoned up, they're more regulated, they're more enterprise. So it's hard. It's hard.
mhm.
Being a business owner in today's age, today, this day, this time with these conditions, I wouldn't put it on anyone. It's very difficult.
Yeah, that I think you bring up some really good points at like what it's like to be in the founder seat. And you have to look at the market. I mean, I think of this time with you've got innovation and AI disrupting things. You got platform
So
disruption, you have
disruptive.
economic
Yes.
disruption, political.
Algorithm changes, you know, all the things.
Yeah, and then you gotta you make decisions to go all in on things. Tell us, like, as you were, like, contemplating that decision and thinking about it and considering what were some of the things going on in your head? Because I think, like,
Yeah.
there's probably a lot of founders out there that are whatever it may not be they're looking at social care, from traditional to
Sure,
social
sure.
care, but they're looking at some version of that and seeing the future.
I
Yeah,
think
what was going on in your head as
anybody
you were process
who yeah, anybody who's in marketing, I think you need to sit down kinda like I have, and this was not like a one-time conversation. I've been having this conversation with myself and with other, trusted people inside and outside of the business for probably about a year now, and really looking at how do we survive? Again, that's always number 1. How do we survive when things are wobbly? Because things are wobbly. And number 2, how do we grow, but not growth for growth's sake? Like, how do we strategically grow? And again, being the salesperson for the entire company gives me a lot more insight, I think, than like most owner operators because this is how I thought about it. We at one time thought we were going to diversify into digital products. And that takes a massive effort, a ton of lift. It was going to require a lot of my time. And the payoff, was, the subscription we were playing around with like a $50 a month subscription. Do you know how many of those I would have to sell to pay not only just break even, pay for all of the time and creativity and the team members that would go into creating this kind of subscription community? The volume alone just scared me to death because it just means we need a massive amount of people to break even, but then also to make money. And then I met with a biz dev consultant who's also a friend of mine. We spent a day together and he was kind of like walking me through the business, talking about it. We were talking about this, community and digital products and things like that. And he was like, "Okay, you want to go here, which is a much smaller audience. They're solopreneurs. They may not even have the $50 a month, quite honestly, because again, the market's like this. And then you have these social care services where you have these massive brands. They're paying you by far and away the most. Like that's where most of your revenue comes from. And the biggest stat that we have is that in the 9 years that we've offered this service, we've had zero customer churn. And so he kind of was like
Wow.
almost shaking me in this meeting, like, what are you doing? Why are you going to spend all this time and effort trying to stand up something that requires a massive amount of volume and therefore work and time and energy and money? I would have to invest a ton of money when you could ride this whole social care. And honestly, I'm not a risky person, but it took a couple of really smart individuals. And I'm so lucky to have colleagues who really have my back and really support me and really want to see me succeed. And when he kind of planted the seed and I went and talked to some of my other colleagues, they all kind of said the same thing. And I'm like, you know, okay, I think this is the right way to go right now. Will I fail, Chris? Yeah, maybe, but I'm going to spend the next 12 to 24 months niching down and going after this because I do think it's the right play. I need one of those clients versus hundreds of those $50 a month subscriptions, or like just looking at our regular services, 10 or 15 of those clients. I need one. And I'm not saying that one is easier because they're enterprise clients. It's a lot more money. It's procurement and legal become involved and all of those things. But with the social proof that we have, I feel like it's the right decision at the right time for our business.
Yeah, Brooke, thanks for like giving us the like what's going on in your brain as you're making those decisions. Cause I know like narrowing your niche and your focus means saying no to some things that actually like
Yeah.
can either like or love or you've done or are comfortable, or it could be good ideas. And to say yes and go all in on something that could be, the future and revolutionary. And I think that that's a real, like, there's a risk in that. But I know I've been seeing this for like almost a decade, but I think it's even more true now. Like specialists are in higher demand and make a lot more money and profit than generalists. And you have to think of your agency like that as far as like
Yeah.
narrowing your focus on, who you're serving or what you're providing. And that is in itself is a risk. But I like to say too, it's not a tattoo. Like you don't
Yes.
it doesn't have to be forever, especially with how things change.
Yes. If we're gonna fail, let's fail fast, Let's fail fast and then and pivot again. I mean, that's the whole ball game of being an entrepreneur, is figuring out where to pivot, where to go, how to fail, and if we are gonna fail, fail fast and then move to the next thing.
Yeah. I also think it's interesting, leading an agency as a marketer, we run campaigns where like, if we run 10 campaigns of any type of sort and maybe like two do decent and one works really well, it's a pretty low success percentage.
Yeah.
But when we're launching our own, ideas or initiatives, like, we try three and they don't work out the way we think, or, like we have a different view when it's our baby.
Yeah. I hate failing. I hate letting people down. I was telling you in the green room, like, I'm such a people pleaser, but one person or two people, right? Again, they're likely, I can't speak for them, but they're likely not looking at the whole board. They really don't have all the information. I don't tell everybody everything. They don't know how much I've invested, how much, cash margins and cash flow and all the other things that go into the decision. So it's a little unfair, I think, to have people push back when you really are trying to do the right thing for the company. At the same time though, everybody has opinions and that's okay. I'm not saying that I'm right and they're wrong because I could certainly fail in this endeavor. But to your point, I've got to try it. It's not a tattoo. We've got to try it. And if we fail, hopefully we fail quickly and we can pivot in the meantime.
Yeah, that's good. What are even within the social care and just social in general, what are some trends that you're watching closely or leaning into here in this year?
The biggest thing is social selling. So, usually when we get in with a company, they definitely understand social care, but they're still looking at it through that support lens. Like this is a place where we're going to save customers. We're going to save money because we're going to save customers or reduce churn, reduce friction. And we get in there every time and we're like, well, let's just take a look see at how much acquisition conversations happening out there around your brand. We tag and label everything. So we have categories based on product, based on acquisition or retention, and then we have subsets of those acquisition or retention. So like for retention or support needs, what are the top complaints? If we know the top 3 complaints, couldn't we go hopefully fix those things, right? Not just give them the workaround, but fix the core issue so that goes away completely. And on the sales side, which is where I really have been leaning in with a lot of our clients lately, we're showing them here are all these acquisition conversations. And then we're going in under, just the label of like, hey, this is a potential sale. And we're doing what we're calling intent tagging. So we're basically trying to understand the behavior behind the acquisition conversation. So like, is it buying intent? Is it a comparison? Because that's what happens a lot, by the way, is Chris will come through and be like, I'm looking at buying this printer and this printer. Why is your printer different than your competitor's printer? Because it looks like you'll have the same features, but theirs is $100 less. So The fact that you came and you said that, but this happens, I can't even tell you, this happens all the time in this comparison piece. They're still giving you the chance. They want to buy from you. They're giving you the chance to say, well, here's why you should buy from us, and here's why that's more expensive, right? So if we can answer that with a really valuable, helpful answer, and then Chris comes back and says, you know, I think I will buy from you. Again, we say like, oh, we'll slide into our DMs. We've got a little promo code for you. We create that sense of urgency with some kind of discount. And then again, when Chris buys, we get attributed that revenue gets attributed to what we do on social. So showing our clients the sales side of it, the acquisition side of it has really been where we've been leaning in for the past year. And they're floored, obviously, because imagine it this way. If you were a brand with a lot of products and we were going through and tagging all of the acquisition and retention conversations, let's just say nice whole, I'm terrible at math. So let's just say nice whole numbers. There were 100 conversations that were acquisition related, in a 30-day period. We could go apply, if it's a product, the MSRP, the price to all of those conversations. And now all of a sudden we've got like, well, hey, so these 100 conversations, if we close them all, be revenue, a $200,000 in revenue. And then they're like, wait, what are you saying back to them? Are you closing them? Like, what can we do? Like all of a sudden they're like, oh my God. But you kind of have to show them the black and white numbers because numbers don't lie, right? Content lies. Content's like reach, views, and then no sales, right? This does not lie. This is, here's how much of the conversation is acquisition. Here's how much money that could be. How are you going to help us help you close these people the next 100 conversations over the next 30 days?
Oh, this is a really good point that you bring up of the ROI, because I think this is something I think we miss a lot of times as agency founders and agencies is like, ultimately, no matter what the brand or like even a nonprofit, like if they're going to hire us for marketing, they're going to need to see an ROI. Some type of services have shorter windows than others and some are better attributed, but ultimately people, they're not looking to buy the social care or the ads or the website. They ultimately, I mean, those are the vehicles, but ultimately they're looking for an ROI. And I think
Yes.
you're talking like you got to think of you're in the mind of the decision maker of a brand. That's how they're thinking. And the larger or the bigger the brands or organizations that you work with, that person's going to be more bottom line focused. So I think you brought
Yes.
up a really good point. And it's not all about just the money, but it's an important piece. I'm glad you pointed that out.
Thank you. I know it's not all about the money, but if people are talking to you and you're ignoring them, which is, unfortunately what a lot of brands are still doing, it really literally hurts my heart to see that kind of stuff still happening. But if you're not responding at all, or you're just not like, if you only build social care from a retention point of view, you're thinking about speed, ticket volume, closing those tickets and moving on, right? So you're already setting up your system to fail you. Yes, we're reducing churn, so we're making money or saving money in that kind of way. But setting up for that decision-making process that we just kind of like highlighted with the example, that's
Mhm.
not about speed or closing tickets. It's really about understanding what the customer wants and giving it to them faster than your competitors can so that they buy from you.
Yeah, that's so good. So Brooke, I know you started off with like, social media and content and that was working. And then that things change in the marketplace and you're starting to see signals and you're experimenting with social care and that's getting traction. I imagine agency founders out there probably are similar. Maybe they're different things. So they've
Yeah.
kind of what got them there and maybe they're starting to see signals that demand for that is increasing or it's getting more difficult or challenging. And they're seeing something in the future, that they see some signals of things that could look promising. What advice would you give them?
Number one, listen to your customers, because if I hadn't have listened to that very first customer, I wouldn't even have this service. We wouldn't even be having this conversation, right? So really listen to your customers. I feel like a lot of times when we hear feedback or when things change, we get defensive. And I'm human. I want to get defensive too, but at the end of the day, I really 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 try to listen, because when you do, wonderful things happen like social care. So number 1, listen to what your customers want. Number 2, I think you have to find the space and the time to have these conversations with yourself and people you trust. So for me, like I was saying, I've had this pivot conversation kind of rolling around in my brain for like a year. I had to talk with myself about it for many months. And then I said, okay, now let me bring this to I have a mastermind group that I belong to. I trust them implicitly. I love them to death. They also own agencies. I talked to them about it. I talked to other colleagues of mine. I talked to my parents, people who aren't even in my, but are both very savvy business people. And even though they don't understand my business, they gave their feedback and information. Every Nearly every person I talked to said, "What are you doing?" Right? So it felt less risky because I told you I'm a very risk-averse person. So that would be my third piece of advice. I'm so conservative. I wouldn't take any risks if I didn't have to. But I think with where we are now, again, macro, I'm looking worldwide, big picture, all the pieces on the board. I think this is the time to take risks. It needs to happen now. So you need to start having these conversations now because we are going to have to probably take a risk and change and tweak slightly. Unless you're wildly successful, great, then you're probably not listening to this podcast. But, think about how you can take calculated risks. Again, I spent a year doing this. I talked to so many people. I went to bed one night and woke up one morning. I was like, I'm going to do this. Figure out how and where you should make your calculated risks and do it sooner rather than later.
Yeah, it makes me think of like, with a abundance of wise counselors or advisors, victory is sure.
Hopefully, I mean, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I love you getting perspective from people that are ahead of you or peers, and then also people that are even outside of, like you mentioned, like your parents or people that
Yeah.
they're not like subject matter experts, but I think that's
Definitely
really
not.
wise.
No. They definitely do not understand what I do, but they understand business. My mom was in finance. My dad has been in fintech for a long time, both very business savvy. So I just said, like, here's what I'm thinking. Like, I really value, obviously, I value them. They're my parents. I love them to death. But, I really value your business opinion. Tell me what you think. And they were both like, yeah, why wouldn't you do this? So
Yeah, so a lot of times you're seeing the macro, and then you have to have that translate to your team. So when it comes to hiring and leading your team, what's one piece of advice you'd give to all the founders out here listening?
For me right now, it's less about skill. I can train skill. I could teach someone how to use a social platform or a social tool. You could even train on like presence and presentations and reporting and things like that. I think the biggest thing for me right now is hiring for people who have a really high EQ, emotional intelligence. When change comes, instead of getting defensive, they ask questions. They're curious. They lead with empathy. They really care about other people. This is obviously not easy to hire for, but especially with what we do in social care, these are the people I look for. So it might be somebody who was a volunteer or worked in nonprofit or worked in hospitality. They're really used to like leading with empathy. And then I have to train them on the social side of things. But for me, EQ, emotional maturity, empathy, those are all the things I look for, and then I can train for the rest.
Oh, that's good. That's really good. So we're going to transition to a rapid fire round. So I'm going to fire 4 or 5 questions at you, and you
Okay.
can just throw out exactly what comes to mind. So what's
Okay.
one tool or a piece of software that makes you more effective?
Social listening. I mean, I'm trying to be tool agnostic. We use Sprout Social, but like social listening because you need to be able to see when people are talking about you, not just to you.
One daily habit, it could be personal or work related, that you swear by.
I'm a huge bird person. I'm a bird nerd. So for me, when I take the dog out every morning, I have this app called the Merlin app, and I just like take a minute and I listen to all the birds and I try to identify them like by myself, just by their sounds, which is so nerdy, I know. But then I open my little app and it literally tells you by the songs like which bird it is, and I see how much I got right.
I love it. I love it. What's one book or mentor that has really impacted you?
Oh my gosh, Nancy Harhut's book, Using Behavioral oh my god, I have it right here on my desk. What a funny coincidence. Using Behavioral Science and Marketing. You can see all my little tabs. If you don't know Nancy, if you haven't read this book, I mean, because what we do on social and in marketing literally is psychology, read this book, Nancy Harhut.
Love it. Love it. And what's one piece of advice that you give all the agency founders listening right now?
Document everything. I know that sounds crazy. I actually am very old school, and I write all of my notes down in these notebooks, and I keep them. And once a year, usually towards the end of a year, beginning of a year, I'll go through I'll, like, pick a really old notebook, and I'll just read through it. It helps you see how much you've changed, how much you've
Ooh.
succeeded. Sometimes it's like, "Oh my god, that was a great idea. We never did anything with that. Let me pick that back up," right? I love, I guess you could call it journaling, but it's really just writing all the business stuff down and then going back and looking over those journals.
Oh, that's great. I love it. I haven't heard that before, but I can see a big thing as we're in the trenches. We only are seeing the slow incremental change.
Yes.
Like sometimes day to day,
Yes.
like we're like, oh, I didn't really see it, but like if we would really zoom out and see like what has happened in 6 months or 12 months or a year or 2 years,
Yes.
we would be floored by it. But it doesn't feel that way like day to day. So I love that. That's
No.
really
Especially, like, when you're fighting for your life, when things have been really rough, you're fighting for your life, go back, take a look, take a minute, take a look, because 'cause it'll make you feel better about yourself. It'll bring back some of that security and confidence.
awesome. And where's the best place online to learn more about you and your agency?
Well, if you want to chit chat with me, I'm always hanging out on LinkedIn. That's my favorite platform. Yes, really. Otherwise, you could go to bsquared.media. It's a not com, and you could find out all about me, our services, case studies, all that good stuff.
Awesome. Brooke, this has been amazing. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast today. So many gold nuggets that you shared.
Thank you so much for having me. Bye, y'all.
Yeah, and for everyone tuning in from the gym, in your car, or at your desk, thank you for joining us. And if this episode was helpful for you, be sure to subscribe and share it with another agency founder who could benefit from it. Because agencies don't rise alone, they rise together. This is Agency Rise.